means one which is closed and its rear side, and the fore side is open. This is followed by what is called as the Gudha Mantapa. Gudha Mantapa, Gudha, the term Gudha means one which is, secretively closed. So the pavilion which is closed on all the major sides, it is a Gudha Mantapa. And this Gudha Mantapa can have 2 or 3 entrances from outside into the temple premises. So by later period, I mean this later period would date back as early as started increasing. There was various mantapas like the Ranga Mantapa, where what is called as Ranga Bhoga. Ranga Bhoga means entertaining the deity with what is called as Nama Sankirtanam and Harikatha. Then the wedding ceremony is performed. Then you have what is called as the Dvajastambha. You have the Balipita. You have the Mahavahana Mantapa. Then you have the Devi shrine, the shrine to the consort of the deity. And you have some minor Parivarayalas. That is, to any creed the temple may belong to. Maybe it is Shaiva, Vaishnava, Shakta. They will have their own retinue of deities. And apart from this, there were the necessary water sources like a Vapi and Kupa and Pushkarini. They're all provided for a temple. So this is a basic temple plan, and these are the adjuncts. And as I was mentioning, the utility of all these mantapas, their nomenclature can be found in the texts. But to explain all these things, you need, at least 1 week time to understand this temple architecture in a very detailed manner. So I will not go into the minor details. So I will just explain about the major part. Now, the texts mention that the primary shrine should have what is called as Shad Vargas. Shad means 6. Vargas are adjuncts, components. So these 6 Shad Vargas, according to the texts, are the Adhishtana, Bitti, Prastara, Griva, Shikara. So explaining each anga would be that Adhishtana is the plinth of the temple, Bitti is the wall of the temple, Prastara is the entablature, Griva is the recessed adjunct over the entablature, Shikara is the superstructure, and Stupi is the Kalasha or the religious above the Shikhara. So, lecture, these all these 6 adjuncts can be found. They are discernible only in the Vimana part, or what is called as the Garbhagriha. See, the inner chamber is called as the Garbhagriha, while the outer part is refers to as the Vimana. So Vimana is the only part where you find all these 6 components. All the other components like the mantapas or other minor adjuncts, they possess Trivargas. That is only the plinth, pillars and entablature. The Parivaraliyas also come under the category of the Vimana. Parivaralaya means the sub-shrines of the retinue of the god, presiding deity. So they come into the category of Vimana. So they may also possess, it is not mandatory, they may also possess these Shad Vargas. So before entering into the detailed explanation of these Shadvargas, we will know something about the Garbhanyasa of the temple. The texts mention that the Garbhagriha can be planned or designed on various plans. So it mentions if the deity is seated or standing, the Garbhagriha can be constructed on a square plan or a circular plan. And if it is a retinue of deities, or if it is a reclining deity, or if it is a female deity, then the Garbhagriha has to be rectangular on its plan. Now, we get a lot of examples for this. So, to just understand it better, for forms like Anantashayana, or group of deities like the Panchaviras or the Saptamatrikas, or even for the recent days, we can quote the example of Kodandarama or Srinivasa along with the Sri Bhunila. So these are all deities which are installed in groups. So if the Garbhagriha is rectangular and plan, it will be more accommodable and better. So they suggest what is called as ayata. Ayata in Sanskrit means an elongated plan. The next two plans are the Vritta and Gajaprishta. Vritta is a circular plan which is especially mentioned for standing deities and occasionally for the seated deities. So a temple which is constructed with a circular vimana would usually accommodate a standing deity. But of course, in a hard medium like stone, especially the granite, chiseling it to a circular form is quite difficult. So we find few rare examples of the Vritta temples. It is not abundant as we find the square or the rectangular. But the major plans of the temples we find are invariably square on plan. And another is the Gajaprishta. Gajaprishta also has another name in the text, which means Dvashra Vritta. Dvashra means two angles. Ashra is an angle. Dvi means two. So if there are two angles and a semicircular rear part, then it is called as Gajaprishta on plan. If it is this is called as an apsidal plan in English. So for in the front, you will have two right angles. In the rear part of the plan, it is apsidal. This is usually found more in the Buddhist architecture and the rock cut structures because it facilitated the chiseling of the stone. And in some Vedic temples also, we find this Gajaprishtakara, especially for the installation of a linga or Surya Narayana Murti. This is a very rare example of a Vrittayata temple. There are two more plans explained in the Agamas, which are called as Ayata Vritta and Vrittayata. They sound the same, but in the implementation, there is a small variation. If it is an Ayata Vritta, it is an elliptical plan where you have two straight lines parallel to each other, and the two sides of the plan would be semicircular. So this is an Ayata Vritta. But Vrittayata is an ovoid plane, a plan which is oval in shape. That is, the Vritta itself is pulled into a oval shape, so it becomes Ayata. This is a rare instance of a Vrittayata temple found in a place called as Rangasthala of Chikbalapur Taluk, where the reclining form of Ranganatha is installed. This is the only plan found in Karnataka till date, and I think even in South India, as of date, it is one. Maybe further researchers may bring out some more examples. The prasada of the Srirangam temple is of this Vrittayata plan, not the Vimana. Only the prasada of the Srirangam temple is Vrittayata. And that is why it is referred to as a Pranavakara Vimanam. Now, these are two rare forms of the plants. So the one which is visible to the right is what is called as Kurma Pitha. Kurma Pitha, this is actually a sepulchral temple built dedicated to Vidyashankara in Sringeri. So as it is built to an ascetic pontiff, as we all know, the forum of seat on which the pontiffs usually seat, they are seated, is what is called as Kurma Pitha. Therefore, the entire temple plan is based on a Kurma Pitha. Here we can see the body of the Kurma, that is a tortoise, Kurma is a tortoise, can either be oval or it can be circular. So, the periphery of the platform of the temple, if you see, it is oval, and there are 6 staircases given to alight onto this platform. And in a tortoise form, we have 4 feet on the either sides, 2 to the right and 2 to the left. And in the front, it would have a face, and in the back part behind it, it would have a tail. So therefore, you see the front stairs, the sopana as it is called, it actually symbolizes the face of the tortoise, and the rear staircase is the tail of the tortoise, and the staircases on the either sides show the 4 feet of the tortoise. Therefore, this plan is what is called as Kurma Pitha. This is the Vidyashankara temple, and this is also the only instance where you have this particular plan implemented in a temple. Now, what you see to the left is what is called as a Sandhara temple. In temple plans, there are 2 kinds of plans which are called as Sandhara and Nirandhara. So, Sandhara means one which has a circumambulatory path. See here, we can see that the main Garbhagriha has an inner Pradakshina Patha surrounding it. One temple which possesses this has what is called as a Sandhara. Sandhara means one which possesses an Pradakshina Patha in between the major wall of the temple and the outer wall of the Garbhagriha. This form is found in the early temples. This plan is of the Virupaksha temple in Pattadakal, and even the Rajarajeshwara temple in Tanjavur is a Sandhara temple on plan. Nirandhara is a plan of a temple which we find abundantly where the form of where the plan of the temple doesn't have any inner circumambulatory path or a Pradakshina Patha inside. So it is just a Garbhagriha. Why was this primarily necessary? If they had to plan a superstructure of, a considerable form, height and weight, and as the initial prasadas and shikaras were of stone, the lower structure had to bear the weight of the superstructure. Therefore, to strengthen the structure, an additional wall was built, and over that, capstones were placed, and above that, the prasada was built. So this is another form which is found only in the early temples, but by the Middle Chola period and onwards, the concept of Sandhara actually completely vanishes. But for some particular, essential part, we find temples which do resemble what is called as the Sandhara, because they wouldn't be planned in that way, but the later inclusions would give us an impression that it is a Sandhara temple. So, am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir. So it's audible, sir. Clear.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, coming to the further part, this what you see to the right is the line drawing of the Shadvargas of a temple in the elevation. Now, we have just understood the plan of the temple. Now, it's an introduction to the elevation. So here, the lowest part, actually when we are discussing about the Shadvargas of a temple or any adjunct related to a temple, we have to discuss it from the lower part to the upper part. We have to go from below to up. So now the lowest member is what is called as Adhisthana. Above that is the Bitti, wall. Above this is the Prastara, and this is the Griva in between, and above the Griva is the Shikhara. Above the Shikhara is what is placed as Stupi. In the left picture also you can see. Is it visible whatever I am pointing at? Are you able to see that? I am pointing some features with the arrowhead.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So this is the Adhisthana part. Then we have the Bitti part. And this is the entablature or the Prastara. And this is the Griva, Shikhara and Stupi. Now we will just understand the parts separately, individually. So before going into the main Shadvargas, texts mention an adjunct which is called as Upapitha. But this is not mandatory. All the other Shadvargas, they are mandatory. But Upapitha is not mandatory. The texts tell that they give 3 reasons for the construction of a Upapitha. It is Shobhartham, Unnatartham and Dardhyartham. Shobhartham is to give elegance to the structure. Unnatartham is to give height to the structure. And Dhridartham, Dardhyartham means to give strength to the structure. If the temple is planned in a huger proportion, as the proportion increases, the Adhisthana cannot be heightened. That will not give a very aesthetic appearance. So, to give a good aesthetic appearance to the structure, to enhance its looks, this Upapitha can be included below the Adhisthana, and that is why it is called as an Upapitha. So this helps to increase the height of the structure also. As well, it provides more strength. Suppose they have some doubt regarding to the ground on which the temple is being built, this gives some extra strength over which the temple are built. And they also have 3 categories of Upapithas are mentioned in the text. They are the Vedibhadra Upapitha. The one which you are seeing is a Vedibhadra Upapitha. This is a Pratibhadra Upapitha. And the third variety is Manchabhadra Upapitha. The Manchabhadra Upapitha is just a very utilitarian, simple Upapitha.
Dr. Manoj sir, sorry to interrupt.
From here, we start the major Shadvargas. Sir, tell me.
Sir, could you please hide that sharing message?
Yes, sir, tell me.
In your presentation, could you please hide the sharing message? Just click in your presentation. There is, yeah.
Okay, so now is it visible?
Thank you, thank you.
Below
thank
the
you.
frame.
Okay. So now, Adhisthana is the lowest moulding of the temple, and the term Adhisthana actually means one which gives strength or holds a structure above it. Adhisthana means to place upon. So the one which has something placed upon it is called the Adhisthana. So this is the Adhisthana part. The popular form of Adhisthana, which is found in almost all the temples, especially the Chola temples, is what is called as the Padabandha Adhisthana. The texts mention 2 major types of Adhisthana called as the Padabandha and the Pratibandha Adhisthana. Padabandha Adhisthana, the term actually means Pada means foot. So
excuse me, sir. The PPT is not in vision, sir, please.
I think when I closed it.
Sir, he told that close the message only. The PPT message is below the frame only. He told to.
No, that's what I closed. here. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, should I repeat what I had just told now, or shall I continue?
Please repeat it, sir.
So, as I was telling, the text mentioned two varieties of adhisthana. One is padabandha and the second is pratibandha. These are the major varieties from which minor varieties are delineated or constructed. So, padabandha actually means, the term padabandha means the adjunct which is projecting like a foot. As the feet project from the human body, this adhisthana projects from the main plumb line of the elevation. Therefore, it is called as the padabandha adhisthana. This is a very simple adhisthana, which is quite elegant to see, at the same time simple for construction. So in constructions where where the number of constructions are multiplied, the padabandha adhisthana would be very feasible for the constructor. So this is what is called as padabandha adhisthana. The second adhisthana mentioned in the text is the pratibandha adhisthana. Prati means the molding which we find above the, I think, okay, here I'll try to explain the moldings of the adhisthana. Again, we have to start from the lowest molding. The lowest molding is called as the upana. Above this upana is what is called as the jagati. Jagati means a platform. Above the jagati, we have what is called as the kumuda. Kumuda is the three-faceted molding which we are seeing here. This is the third part. And above this is a recessed molding which is called as gala. And above this is what is called as the prati. Prati is the mahapatti. So these are the features of a padabandha adhisthana. When this prati gets exaggerated and decorated, as we see in this adhisthana, see here, we have the lower molding which is the upana. Above that we have jagati. This is the kumuda. Above kumuda, what we see here is the prati part is decorated in a very elaborate manner. So that adhisthana which possesses a highly decorated prati, in the picture, can you see this? Is it visible? So this part is highly ornate. So this, the one which has an ornate prati is what is called as pratibandha adhisthana. Now there are a lot of sub-varieties branched from these two major varieties, and they are usually based on the decorations found on the adhisthana. So I would not go into all those minor details, just the major kinds. If you know, you can understand the purpose of the adhisthana if you see in a temple. This is the third variety of an adhisthana, which is called as kapota bandha. Now, this is one difference. It is better if you can know, because padabandha adhisthana is a popular adhisthana in the Tamil region Dravidian temples, whereas the kapota bandha adhisthana is found mostly in the Kannada regions of the Dravida temples of the Kannada region. So the inclusion, see, you can see in padabandha, you saw all these lower moldings. You had the jagati, you had the kumuda, you had the gala, you had the prati. But here you see there is a kapota included into it. Kapota is a drip stone, which I will explain while explaining the prasthara. So this is included into the adhisthana, which gives this the name kapota bandha. So these are the three major adhishthanas, but The text mentioned mainly the Padabandha and Pratibandha, of which you have various sub-varieties. Now, coming to the second adjunct, which is the Bhitti. Bhitti is also called as Kudya in the texts. Bhitti is actually means that adjunct which separates the inner quarters from the outer periphery, outer complex. So that is what is called as a Bhitti. So Bhitti means a wall which separates the outer portions from the inner chambers. So usually the texts mention that there are some mandatory decorations which have to be done on the Bhitti, and again some are they are optional. They are not very mandatory. For example, see, can you see these two pilasters here? These pilasters are called as Bhittipada in the texts. So this is usually a mandatory decorative motif, which is usually used even in a small shrine, humble shrine, to break the monotony of the form. So therefore, these two are the mandatory decorative adjuncts we see. And in between, we see what is called as the Torana. Torana is that decorative motif which resembles, a gateway entrance with two pilasters, which is canopied by a floral decorative arch. And many a times this Torana can have what is called as a koshta. Koshta usually means there can be a koshta without Torana also. Koshta means a recessed a recession in the wall which accommodates to place some sculpture of a deities, which we find. This is called as a koshta. So if it possesses a sculpture of a deity, then it is called as a Deva Koshta. A koshta can be just a koshta without any deity also. Then we have what is called as the Jalavatayana. Jalavatayana is more utilitarian. It allows air and light to enter to the inner chambers. There are two more decorative motifs, which are the Stambha Panjaras and Kumbha Panjara, which you see on the either sides. Now we will see the pictures of these adjuncts. So this is a Bhitti, a temple wall. On plan, you can see there are the Bhadra. The projection and this Bhadra will be rectangular on plan. And the corners will be square on plan. And these projections are called as the Kutas. The wall in between the Bhadras and the Karnas are what is called as Salilantaras. Sorry, I think I mentioned the Kutas for the corner projections. They are actually Karnas. So Karnas are, because on plan, if you see, they project like the ear of an animal. That is why they are referred to as Karnas. Bhadra, as the term itself explains, Bhadra is called so because it provides more strength to the wall of the temple. So the in-between wall is called as the Salilantara. So on this you can see, you find a Torana here, you have Bhittipadas here, you have a Jalavatayana here. So these are all the decorative things which you can use or implement on the wall. Now coming to the kinds of walls. In the construction of walls, there are three major kinds of walls mentioned in the texts. One is called as the Phalaka Kudya, the another is called as the Jalaka Kudya, and the third one is the Mrunmaya Kudya. Phalaka Kudya is one which is made out of planks. maybe slabs of stone or planks of wood. That is a solid wall which is closed. Then comes what is called as the Jalaka Kudya. It's a perforated wall. Wall with, Jalaka means perforations. Wall with perforations, so that, light and air is allowed into the inner chambers. Then Mrinmaya Kudya is the wall which is built out of brick and mortar. So this is an example of Jalaka Kudya. This is a wall which has perforations, and it is built between the Godamantapa or the main hall and the antechamber. That is the antarala of a temple. But a Jalaka Kudya is not given to the Garbhagriha. Now, what do you see to the right is a Torana. See, Torana is just, it need not have a recessed central portion. You see there are two pilasters over which a floral canopy is placed, and this is what is called as a Torana. And what you see to the left is a Koshta. Koshta is the recessed portion on a wall, and we find a sculpture of this is actually a very rare sculpture of Uma Santwana Murti found in a Chola temple. So this, when it possesses a sculpture like that, it is referred to as a Deva Koshta. And you see here, these are what are called as the Bitti Padas. Bitti Padas are the pilasters. These are the various kinds of Jalavatayanas. Actually, the texts mention various names for the Jalavatayanas based on the form, their utility, their placement and everything, and their decoration too. But as I said, it would be too elaborate, too intricate to mention now. So I'll just mainly explain. So this is Jalavatayana is one which allows, Vatayana means a window, that which allows air into the chamber. So Jala means perforations. So you see, you can see some square holes made, and here you see the holes do not have any particular shape, but the decoration dominates the window pane. So therefore, the name of this is given based on the decoration as Valli Mandala, whereas in this, the name is given based on the shape of the hole, which allows the air into it. So it's called as a Turya Ashtra Jalavatayana. But these are all very intricate details. Now, this is, again, it is not mandatory, but we find these two motifs in great numbers, in huge numbers on the temple walls. What you see to the right is called as the Kumbha Panjara, and what we find to the left is called as the Stamba Panjara. Now, as I was mentioning about the Padabandha Adhisthana and the Kapotabandha Adhisthana, as I said, Padabandha is popular in the Tamil Dravida style. Kapotabandha is popular in the Karnataka Dravida style. Likewise, Kumbha Panjara is a motive which is more popular in the Tamil Dravida style. It starts appearing from the late Chola period and extensively continues during the Vijayanagara period. Actually, this motif penetrates into the Karnataka land during the Vijayanagara period. And the Stamba Panjara, what you see to the left, is mainly found in the Kalyana Chalukya and Hoysala temples. The concept is same in the construction of both these. The nomenclature varies because here what you see is a kumbha. Kumbha means a pot. And this is Panjara means, like a cage or a shrine-like structure. So once if the Panjara is placed over a kumbha, it becomes Kumbha Panjara. If it is placed over just a stamba is a pilaster. If it is placed over a pilaster, it becomes what is called as Stamba Panjara. But again, there are some metaphysical explanations can be given for the this particular adjunct, but I think we lack time for all those discussions now. Now coming to the third anga or varga. This is prastara. Prastara means entablature. Prastara is one part which covers the entire structure above. That is why it is called as a prachadana also. Achadana means covering. So prachadana is that molding which covers the entire structure. Usually a prastara has 4 major moldings, beginning from what is called as Uttara, Valabhi, Kapota and Vajana. In the initial days of temple construction, especially when a temple is constructed in a soft medium like wood, brick and mortar, all these moldings become very utilitarian. But in the temples constructed of stone, their utility purpose is less, but their decorative purpose is more. Now, these 4 moldings can be decorated according to the taste of the builder, and texts also mention about their decoration also. It gives rules and regulations how these places can be decorated. So Uttara means just a beam. Valabhi is a molding which is in between the Kapota and Uttara in a semicircular with a semicircular contour at one end. Kapota is functional. Kapota is the drip stone. The main purpose of Kapota is not to allow water to seep either into the structure or into the lower moldings like the Adhisthana. So Kapota is a very, very utilitarian molding which acts as the drip stone, preventing rainwater from entering into the wall of the temple. Above that is what is called as the Vajana. So this is a prastara of an early period. So this is the Uttara part, the lowest molding. See, this is Valabhi. Here you can see small dwarf pictures carved over it. If it possesses such squattish dwarf figures, it is called as a Bhutamala. You can have other decorations like that of Chakravakamala or a row of cranes. You have rows of, episodes from famous epics and dramas carved on this particular portion. And this is the Kapota, and above this is what is found as what we call as the Vajana. See, this is a prastara of the Hoysala style. Because Hoysala usually it is considered quite different from the Dravida's other structures, contemporary structures which we find. But basically Hoysala structures are not different from Dravida structures. They are Dravida in form. But as they used a very soft medium for the construction of their temples, they stylized their adjuncts and they decorated it very intricately. So therefore, the form was not as clear as it is in what you find in a regular Dravida temple. So this is a Hoysala prastara. See here, this is the Uttara part. You have the Valabhi underneath. See, Kapota is a little different from its form when compared to the early Dravida style or the other Dravida forms. And above this, you have what is called as the Vajana. So these are the Uttara and Valabhi. See here, you can see an episode carved on the Uttara. This is from Ramayana. Here we can see what is called as the texts actually say Hari Kari Makarair Natakair Vichitritam. Meaning Hari means both a monkey as well as a lion. Kari means an elephant. Makara means aquatic animal, especially the crocodile. And Natakair means episodes. You have to decorate the Uttara and Valabhi with these themes. This is what is mentioned in text. So we find examples for all these. So these are the structural evidence. Now, Hara is one part which has to be mentioned while discussing Shadvargas, but it is not a mandatory part. It is not a very essential part, but you find it in almost all the Vimanas. Hara actually means a parapet wall. A wall, a hand wall, which is constructed above the prastara part. So this actually serves as a support to the Griva Shikara, which is placed above. And why is it called Hara? To break the monotony, instead of just placing stone, small miniature structures, pavilions, are placed in a row. And these pavilions have names like Kuta, Panjara, and Shala. Shala is oblong in plan, it will have a rectangular plan. Kuta is square on plan. Panjara is apsidal on plan. So the garland of all these architectural members is what is called as Hara. See, in Hara we have two varieties. One is called as Anarpita Hara. Anarpita Hara is found on temple plans where you have a Sandhara plan beneath, where the outer hand wall is separated from the bitti of the second story. This is what is called as an Anarpita Hara. That is that one which doesn't possess, or which is not in contact with the second story of the building. Of course, we get a lot of examples for Arpita Hara because all the other Shikaras belong to the Arpita Hara class. Now, these are the adjuncts. This is the Shala, which is oblong and plan. See the sides, you can see it has a wagon vault kind of contour. This is Kuta, which is square on plan. And again, all these minor adjuncts, they will also possess 6 vargas again. See, this acts as the Adhisthana, this is the Bitti, you have the Shikara part, you have the Prastara part, everything you can see here. This is Panjara. See, can you see? It is a horseshoe shaped in the front view of this, and it is apsidal and plan. So this is the form of a Panjara. Now, coming to the upper 3 adjuncts of the temple, which are the Vedi, Griva, and Shikara. Vedi is a platform which is constructed above the Prastara. See, you can just not place a Griva directly above the Prastara if you have a spacious Garbhagriha beneath, because it will not give a very aesthetic appearance. Moreover, as we were discussing, Garbhagriha is a very sanctified place where the main votive sculpture is installed. So it has to be very special, and the upper part, the superstructure, should resemble a crown. It should be as if a crown is placed on the head of a king. The upper part superstructure should resemble that. So therefore, to give some height above the Prastara, there is a platform built. Vedi actually means a platform. So above what is human neck is recessed from the face. This portion is recessed when compared to the Shikara. So Griva, and Griva has a purpose to serve. It is mainly to withhold the weight of the Shikara. And this is the Shikara above the Griva, and this is the finial. This is the topmost finial, which is called as the Stupi. So with the Stupi, all the Shadvargas are completed. Can also, it's not again Man Devatas and the Vahana Devatas. So what happens, you can, from a distance itself, you can understand if it's a Shaiva shrine or a Vaishnava shrine or a Shakta shrine based on the Vahana of the deity or the form of the deity which is placed above the Griva. So this is a Griva Devata which decorates the Griva part of the Prasada, Vimana. Now, there are 3 varieties of Shikaras mentioned in the text. As I was telling, Shikara is the capstone part of the superstructure, which is which acts as the capstone, which covers the entire this thing. So there are three kinds: Brahmachanda, Vishnuchanda, and Rudrachanda Shikara. They get these names based on their form, on their plan. This is a Brahmachanda Shikara. Here, this plan of the Shikara is square in form. So, therefore, this gains the name Brahmachanda. Numerically, we can understand Brahma is related to the number 4. So, therefore, this is a Brahmachanda Shikara. And this is a Vishnuchanda Shikara, where the plan is octagonal. It has 8 faces. So, a Vishnuchanda Shikara is an octagonal plan of a Shikara. Rudrachanda. Rudra, as we know, Rudra means Shiva. Major form of Shiva we pray is in the form of Linga. So therefore, what is the form of Linga? It is cylindrical. So the Shikara, which is circular in plan is called a Rudrachanda Shikara. So these are the 3 varieties of Shikara. But here, we have to understand, just because it carries the names Rudra, Vishnu, Brahma, it is not very sectarian. You can find a Rudrachanda Shikara on a Vaishnava temple, or the vice versa. You can find a Rudrachanda Shikara on the Vishnuchanda Shikara on a Shaiva shrine also. It is not sectarian. Even we find this kind of Shikaras on Buddha and Jaina structures also. Now, I would just give a very small introduction to the pillar types of the found in the temples. This is essential because there are various kinds of pillars found in the pavilion surrounding the temple. And the texts mention these pillars, and they have categorized them based on the morphology of the pillars as well as the decorations found on them. So the major kinds of pillars found are Brahmakanta, Vishnukanta, and Saumyakanta pillars. Again, Brahmakanta pillar is a pillar which has 4 faces, which is square on plan. Here, the form usually applies to the shaft of the pillar, because this base of all the pillars will be square. Only the shaft can vary in the form. So, the shaft of the pillar, see, this is the shaft of the pillar. If the shaft of the pillar has 4 faces, then it is called a Brahmakanta Stambha. Now, as I was telling, even the adjuncts of the temple have their own Shadvargas. So, just to understand the Shadvargas of a pillar, see, all the pillars possesses what is called as a Pitha, which is the lowest molding. Pitha, above that we have what is called as the Danda. Above Danda we have what is called as a Kumbha. Kumbha is a vase-like motif. Above that it is a Tadi. Tadi is usually translated as the cushion capital. Above the cushion capital we have what is called as Mandi and Phalaka. Above this is the Potika place. So these are the 6 this thing. But as I said, for elementary students this will be too much to grasp. So I'll just explain the major forms of the pillar. And if time permits, some other time, we can go into the minor details. So, Vishnukanta Stambha is a pillar which has 8 faces, and Saumyakanta pillar is a shaft which possesses 16 faces. These are other varieties of pillars which are found in huge numbers. They are the Purvashra Stambha, the Chitrakhanda Stambha, and the Shrikara Stambha. Purvashra means the pillar shaft which is reflective. See, you can see the vase-like design is inverted here in the form of a bell. So this is like a reflection of the 4 part. So that's why it is called as a Purvashra Stambha. This is found in huge numbers in the early temples, especially of the Gangas and Nolambas. This is a Chitrakhanda Stambha which is found in umpteen numbers during the Vijayanagara period and late Chola period. Chitrakhanda means one which is wrought in various forums. It is not, the forum is not very uniform. It is not in one definite forum. It is wrought in various forms. It is Chitra means variety. So Chitra Khanda means one which is wrought in various forms. Then what we have called as the Shrikara Stamba. Shrikara Stamba is the bell-shaped shaft which is mainly used by the Hoysala temple. So if you visit a Hoysala temple, the maximum number of pillars we find come under this category. These are the composite pillars which are called as Samyukta Stambas, again found in huge numbers, but they start appearing from the Vijayanagara period onwards. So these are called as Samyukta Stambas, and as I mentioned, the texts have a lot of categories, types, subtypes of these pillars also. So as this is a very general introduction into the temple architecture, I would like to stop here with the Dravida architecture. Sir, do you have time to continue with the Nagara?
Please continue, sir. If you have time, you can continue, please.
I have time. You must tell me about the time from your side.
Yeah, for me, you can continue, sir.
Yes, sir.
Suresh, sir.
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
our
sir.
participants, frankly speaking, most of them have given a compliments that is one of the best architecture lecture they have had. So we don't want to stop it. Let us please continue, sir, because the way you are
Yes, sir,
explaining,
please.
is superb. Very well explained. Yeah.
So now,
Thank you, sir.
So now we will know about the Nagara temples. Now in Indian temple forums, there are two major divisions. As I was telling, the first one we discussed Dravida, which is the southern temples. Nagara is usually the name given to the northern temples built in the northern part of the country. But it is very unfortunate that in the up north, we have lost a lot of ancient temples, maybe Kashmir or Indraprastha, today's Delhi. They were all major seats. See, Kashmir, Indraprastha, Kurukshetra, Magadha, Pataliputra, they were all capital cities from times unknown. So naturally, there must have been innumerable temples built in all these places. But unfortunately, they are all lost today. Majority of them are lost. Only some extant examples start appearing from, say, somewhere from the middle part of India, that is Madhya Pradesh and onwards. But when the temple activities was revived in these northern parts, both the patrons as well as the religious people have taken pains to revive the construction activity in a traditional way and manner. Therefore, we are again fortunate in a way to understand what are the textual prescriptions given, which have been continued in a later time, say from 16th century onwards. But again, Nagara is a term which is used to denote a temple which is constructed in a Nagara. So we have a popular belief in our Sanatana Dharma that any place without a temple is equal to a crematorium. Why is it considered so? It is not just a statement made without any logic behind. See, in days back, temple was not just a religious place as it is today. Temple was a place where the majority of the social activities. In our Sanatana Dharma, we don't have divisions like social life, religious life, economic life in a very a compartmentalized way. We don't have that. So we have everything was related. Even in a social activity, we include rituals. We invoke the deity, we take blessings of the deity for our social activities. So therefore, a temple was the nucleus of a society where the activities of all kinds used to take place in a temple. It wouldn't be out of place to mention that temples served as banks in those days, because economic activities were done. When donations were given to the temple, they could not just place it. It was, it was recycled. It was given as loans, debts, and then the interest were collected. So such activities. Marriages took place in the temple complex. They were the education centers. So therefore, a temple was the nucleus of a Nagara. Therefore, it is called as Nagara. It is one which actually stands as a backbone to the Nagara temples. As we have various styles in Dravida also, there are various styles in Nagara style. The most popular Nagara style which is mentioned in the text and what we find as living examples today dating back to the 8th century, 9th century is what is called as the Kalinga Nagara style. See, this is actually a Nagara example from a place called Pattadakal in Karnataka. I am showing this to see because while discussing the architecture, temple architecture, we should have a pan-Indian conscious. Many times what happens, there are some scholars who try to, delineate the temple styles as if the south was something totally different, the north was something totally different. No, there was a lot of giving and taking amongst the, the kingdoms, imperial kingdoms of those days. And yet another reason I am showing this is, of late, in these days, there are some scholars who are trying to promote the idea that when there was rivalry between two kingdoms, the rival kings used to destroy the temples of the rival kingdom, which is a very wrong notion. See, this temple kind was brought into Karnataka when Pulikeshi won over the land of Kalinga. So we have such examples where, this cultural giving and taking was there in huge, it was respected. The temples and the deities were respected by the rival kings, and they tried to incorporate those styles into their indigenous places. They assimilated it, they inculcated into their extant methodology of their temple constructions. So here you find a Nagara temple standing amidst a temple complex of Pattadakal. So this was the forum of the temple culture where we have to observe the pan-Indian ideology behind construction of a temple. Now, understanding the plan of the Nagara temple. Like the Dravida temple, the same system is followed in Nagara also, because as I was telling, see, the basic ethics, it is the same. Only it is regional difference because based on the available material and also the environment. If it is the environment is more to rain, they have to use some other methodology. If it is too dry, they have to adopt some other methodology. So that is why these styles take their birth. Otherwise, the basic ethic behind temple construction is the same. So now, here this is what is called as a Diyal in Nagara terms, which means the Garbhagriha. Deval or Diyal it is called. Deval means the place where the Deva resides. Then we have what is called as the Jagmohan. Jagmohan is the assembly hall where the devotees assemble to have the darshan of the presiding deity. It is followed by what is called as the Bhog Mandir and Nat Mandir. Nat Mandir is something which is equivalent to our Ranga Bhoga Mandir. See, we have this tradition of, as I was telling, we offer everything to the God. You learn some cultural arts. You learn a visual art. First thing we do is we perform it in front of the God. We call it as an Arangetram. We sing in front of the God at the first instance. Then we do that. So therefore, this Nat Mandir is where all the cultural activities like the recitation of verses, Puranas, the performance of dances and music concerts, these things to take place. Then you have the Bhog Mandir. Bhog in Northern tradition means the offering made, offering of food made, that is the Naivedya offered to the god, made to the. So this was in a very separate periphery, and this was distributed among the poor and needy after it was offered to the god. So on plan, these are the four major adjuncts of a Nagara temple. This is the elevation of a Nagara temple. Here we are seeing the Deval part. This is also, see, Nagara is also called as Rekha Nagara, Rekha Deval. We have to observe the form to understand the difference between Dravida and Nagara in a very, very primary way. It is very simple. See, the moldings of a Nagara temple are usually horizontal. The stones placed are, of course, vertical. But if you see the moldings, they appear very horizontal. You see, the molding starts from here. It proceeds this way and it joins the tip here. Whereas in Dravida temples, we find the moldings placed vertically one above the other. So the basic appearance itself will give you an idea broadly to differentiate between the Dravida and Nagara style. So that is why this term Rekha is used. Rekha means a line. See, we find this linear moldings here. So the linear moldings give it the name as Rekha Nagara. In Rekha Nagara also, the same concept of the plinth, the wall, and the superstructure follows. But the nomenclature is different. See, the entire temple is built over a platform which is called as the Jagati. And you have the Adhisthana part, which is the plinth, is usually called as the Janga. Janga technically means a knee. As the human weight is upheld by the knee, the Janga is the one which holds the weight of the entire structure. And above that, we have what is called as the Bhada. Above that, you have the Chapra, which is the seal. Over the Chapra, in the placement of Shikhara, we have what is called as the Amalaka Shila. Amalaka means gooseberry. It is Nellikai. So the capstone, which is in the form of Amalika, it's called as Amalika Shila. And above the Amalaka Shila, we have what is called as the Stupi. And the outer form of the Jagmohan is called as the Pida Deval. This is the Rekha Deval and this is the Pida Deval. Pida Deval, you can see that it has a very tapering pyramidic form of a superstructure, which gives an appearance of a superstructure, but it is not as tall as the superstructure of the Garbhagriha. So these are the elevation angas of a Nagara temple. This is the Adhisthana of a Nagara temple. See, all the moldings, they resemble the Dravida moldings, and they have the same names like Upata, Upana, Kumuda, and sometimes the Kapota is called as the Kapota Pali or Kapota Palika. That's all. These are all synonymous in Sanskrit. But the major difference which we delineate in a Nagara Adhisthana is the presence of these two moldings, which is called as a Khura and Kumbha. See, this molding itself has the form of a pot. That is why it gets a name Kumbha, and this is Khura. Khura and Khulla usually means something which is short and squattish. So this molding, which is squattish and squarish in its form, and which it again gives strength to the Kumbha above. So this Khura and Kumbha are the major moldings which we find only in the Nagara Adhisthana, and it is not a part even in the decorative subtypes of the Adhishthanas of the Dravida order. Now, this is an elevation, complete form, you can understand. See, this is the Adhisthana part, you have the Bhada part, you have the Chapra. Of course, the Amalaka is lost. This is actually the Kashi Vishweshwara temple in the Pattadakal premises dating to the 8th century. See, this is a closer view of, see, this is the major Jagati or the platform over which we find, see, Kalinganagara temples are usually built in the coastal areas. So naturally, the soil would not be very strong. Therefore, they had to build a huge platform to accommodate the entire structure. So this is what was probably later adopted in the later days by the Hoysalas. And see, here we have the lower moldings of the Adhisthana. We have this Kumuda part. And see, this is the Khura part and this is the Kumbha part. So as I have explained in the line drawing, you can just understand that. This is the Parshurameshwara temple from Bhuvaneshwar. See, we find the example of a Rekha Nagara here. See, this is the Amalaka stone topped by a stupi. And there are other decorative motifs in the Nagara temples which have to be mentioned. See, this projection in the mid part of the Chapra, that is the Shikara of the temple, is called as the Shukanasa. Nasa means nose. This projects from the superstructure like the nose projects from the face of a human being. So that's why it is called a Nasa. And as it is, it resembles the nose of a beak of a parrot. It is called as Shukanasa. Then you can see there are some minor shrines, minaret shrines, which resemble a balcony. These are usually called as the Varandikas. These actually, when they get assimilated with the southern styles, they give birth to the further forms even in the Dravida architecture in later period. So these projections are called as the Varandikas. This is the Amalaka Shila, which is placed on the top of the superstructure. See, here we can know how an Amalaka Shila was usually made, because there are two kinds of Amalaka Shilas used in a Nagara temple. Are you able to see there are small stones which resemble an Amalaka Shila placed in the corners of the Rekha contour here? So these are they are quadrant in form and they resemble Amalaka stone and they are called as Bhumi Amla. Whereas the Amalaka above the superstructure complete form is called as the Amalaka Shila. Here you see that the center part of the Amalaka Shila has a pivot to place the stupa, to fix the stupa into it. And we find a small post hole made here. So what is the purpose? The purpose of this post hole made in the Amalaka Shila is actually to place a flag staff to indicate the presence of a temple and the superstructure, or even the flag staffs, the Dvaja. In Dravida style, we have separately what is called as a Dvaja Stamba. In the northern style, the Nagara style, a flag itself is placed above the Amalaka Shila. So this is the purpose of that post hole we find here. See, this is a complete form of a Nagara temple. This is actually a very beautiful temple again from Bhuvaneshwar, and it is the Mukteshwara temple. Here you can see the major the Sanctum Sanctorum Vimana part and the Jagmohan part, and we have a small Prakara wall, and the entrance is it's the Torana part, and this Torana gives further birth for the Kalyani Chalukyan and Hoysala Toranas in the Karnataka Dravida style. Now, as Dravida temples are bifurcated into various other styles like Chola Dravida, Hoysala Dravida, and based on the dynastic names or the styles by themselves. Nagara temples also have some major styles. Like I was mentioning, the Kalinga Nagara or the Rekha Nagara. Then there is another variety called as the Shekhari group of temples. And there is one major kind which is mentioned in the texts, like the text of Samarangana Sutradhara and Aparajita Pracha. That is what is called as the Bhumija style. This is one example of Bhumija temple found in Karnataka in a place called Dambal. So Bhumija is a type of a Nagara temple. As we have to here grasp one thing. Names given to the forums in Sanskrit, they themselves explain either the morphological form or the purpose of the structure, because names are given in such a way. Bhumi usually means a story of a temple, not our katha. It is a tala of the structure. So here you see, why is it called Bhumi? If this is one story, this which is successive of this story appears to as if it is born out of it. So it is actually a replica of what you see in the lower vertical band. So all these appear as the replica of the lower vertical band. So therefore, it is the replica of the earlier form. Therefore, it is called as a Bhumija temple. So this Bhumija temple is one major variety of temple which we find in various major centers of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Of course, Shekhari and Latina are also two varieties, but unfortunately I could not find the pictures to show them and explain them. So with that, I think I have introduced Dravida and Nagara styles successfully.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your insight on temple architecture, and the way your lecture is it's very impressive one. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Tell me, I'm hearing you. Tell me.
Sir, there is a question. Can I read the question?
Yes.
From participant, there is a question. Architect Sai Pooja. Sai Pooja, question that. Hello. I would like to post a question to Manoj sir.
Yes.
Asking his view on, like a temple-related structures being built with Sabha Mandapa or Mani Mandapa, dedicated to music and dance offering to God, were there any such structures dedicated for rainwater harvesting and water distributing stored for temple and community around the temple complex?
Yes.
This is the question.
See, there are three major water sources in the temple complex. So the three major sources are called as the Kupa, Vapi, and Pushkarini. Kupas are the wells which are dug very near to the Sanctum Sanctorum. As you know, the most purest water should be given to the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Garbhagriha. Therefore, wells were dug quite near to the Sanctum Sanctorum. The other two sources are Vapis and Pushkarinis. Pushkarinis are mainly rain-fed water tanks. Pushkarinis are those, I think you have huge numbers of Pushkarinis in Tamil Nadu, and they have names for them. Like you have the Kamalale Pushkarini in Tiruvarur, like that we have that spacious Pushkarinis. They were rain-fed water sources. They were both for the public as pilgrims, public use and other things. And it was also used for the import from water. Then comes Vapi. Vapi is the water source which is a stepped well. Vapi means a stepped well. It is also rain-fed. These are the three water sources, and their placement is also mentioned in the Puranas and Agamas.
Thank you, sir. Participants, if you have any question, you can ask, please.
Sir, Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
I'm Rajaram Pattabhiraman. More than the question, it's a token of appreciation. This was a very fantastic lecture, sir.
Thank you.
One of the best lectures I've heard about temple architecture. The best thing was the way in which you took it, the pace at which you took it, sir. Where everyone can easily, the substance can get in. So that was really excellent. Thank you so much. I really want to thank Hindustan School of Architecture for arranging a lecture. Of this type. This is very good. And the tool in YouTube, it will be really helpful. Can I have your okay, can you have it in the chat, sir? Your email ID.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Yeah, we'll put it.
Thank you so much for a wonderful lecture.
Okay. Sir, thank you, Pattabhiram. Thank you.
Yes.
Sir, Manoj, sir, there is some of the questions. Can we go to the questions?
This is Shivshankar Babu.
Yeah, Shivshankar, sir. You come.
Excellent coverage of the Vimana and beautiful and simple details. I would like to hear a few words about Gopurams and in what way they are different from the Vimanas. A few examples would help.
See, there is what has happened in the common dialect. The prasada is usually referred to as Vimana Gopuram, and the main Raja as Rajagopuram in the contemporary dialect. See, the prasada is the textual term used for the superstructure built over the Vimana. Why is it called a prasada is this? Over a Vimana, to give the form of a crown, they include what is called as the kalas. If you find Vimanas which possess 2 and 3 stories. For 3 vargas, the way you have a pyramidical construction made, which is called as the prasada with the hara. So prasada is to show that it is something which is very sanctified. The term is itself denotes it is sanctified part. So prasada is one which is derived from the root prasada, prasannata, and placed over the Vimana, the Garbhagriha. Coming to Gopura, the term Gopura was the main entrance for the townships and villages in days back. And this system is found, the Dwara Praveshars are found even in sanctuaries like the Ellora. So, why is it called Gopura? The reason was the topmost superstructure of a Gopura, the corners resemble the horn of a cow. That is why it is called as the Gopura. What is placed in the entrance of any structure. Vimana prasada is one which is placed on the most sanctified part of the structure. But in the common dialect, it becomes Vimana Gopura and Raja Gopura. And actually, Raja Gopura is also not the right term. It is actually a Gopura. Gopura is found in the text, which is called as Dwara Shobha, Dwaramana, and other names. But as the Vijayanagara rulers, the Rayas, popularized it in a huge
Apple is in Mylapore is an example of
Kapalishwara. Mainly it must be a Nirandhara temple. I saw it quite long back. Brihadishwara temple of necessary share. What are the angas we find? So Kapaleshwara temple is a Nirandhara temple with a later inclusion.
Okay, sir.
Can you get me, sir? Just to explain further on this, in Mylapore temple, the mandapa or the prakara which we come around this is basically a extension mandapa outside the main Vimana. So it is not Sandhara.
So can I have the next question?
The next question, what do you mean by Karnataka Dravida style? Karnataka Dravida style. Dravida style temples which are built in temples or these temples? The question is confusing.
No. I got it. They want to know the difference between the Karnataka Tamil Dravida style. Okay.
Yes.
It's very simple. They are Dravida basically. But there is no difference in the plan, the necessity, adjuncts or whatever. But what happens due to the medium of construction? For example, the Pallava temples and Chola temples are mainly of hard granite stone. Whereas even the early temples from the Badami Chalukyan era, the temples were constructed of sandstone. So it so happens there was a facility among some sculptors to sculpt certain features deriving from the same Dravida root, giving it some slight difference, which was popular in the land where the Kannada rulers ruled. The same was done in the medium, where the sculptors were patronized by the Tamil-speaking rulers. So that is where we delineate, we try to differentiate. Otherwise, all the major things are the same. It is primarily the same. When it comes to some adjuncts or some parts which are introduced due to the medium of the stone or the necessity of the environment, then we refer it to as this particular. See, for example, the coastal temples will be totally different from what the temples we find in the plain lands because of the necessity. So this is where we delineate them as Chola Dravida or Tamil Dravida and Karnataka Dravida. Hope I am clear.
Oh, thank you, sir. Sir, director sir is there? Suresh, sir, director sir?
I'm available, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, you can continue, sir. You can.
Okay, sir. So all questions are over, sir. So anyone is there to any more further questions, please?
Almost it's over. If the participant,
yes, sir.
we can conclude.
Okay, sir. So once again, good afternoon to all. On behalf of Hindustan School of Architecture and Hindustan College of Arts and Science, we would like to thank Manu sir for accepting our invite to share his knowledge, experience through webinar, sacral architecture, about temple architecture during his busy schedule. Sir, frankly, one of the best temple architecture lecture we have ever had.
Excuse me, I had a question.
Okay. Yeah, please carry on. Yeah.
Yes, Sonali has a question.
Sonali,
I'm
please.
sorry for putting the question at last moment. My question is, since the Dravidian architecture has a long history since its inception, so to which era is the contribution of Gopuram should be credited? If we see in the Shore temple, there isn't any concept of Gopura. So when this grand concept of Gopura actually came?
The grandness of Gopura increased during the Vijayanagar period, when they had to establish themselves against an alien culture, so to show their supremacy. It became in a very maximum proportion during the Vijayanagar period. But that does not mean the earlier structures did not have any concept of Gopuram or the Mahadwaras. You find them as early as, even the Toranas of Sanchi are a form of Dwaramantapa. Then you can see it in the Ellora Kailasa temple, you have a Dwaramantapa. The 36th cave, the Indra Sabha of Ellora has a Dwaramantapa. So that is a very age-old concept, as old as the temple itself. But the grandeur as the, the multiple, because in Vijayanagara period, you also see they started using a very soft medium, brick, wood and mortar, and it was shallow, hollow, complete, the structure was hollow inside. So they could go to any heights. So that's when it started.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Somil. So one more, just a small doubt. So the concept of Yali that is seen in all the pillars. So is Vijayanagara Empire credited for that?
First, it is not a Yali. It's a wrong pronunciation of the word Vyala in Sanskrit. The text mentions Vyala, but it is the anglicized version of Vyala. The English scholar as Yali. That's a wrong usage. However, this is also an earlier concept. The texts mention pillars with a composite pillar with the form of Vyala should be called as Vyalakanta, and such pillars are found even in the Hoysala temples. As I was telling, the temple activity became very huge in proportion during the Vijayanagara period for one particular reason and necessity. So therefore, when they started, they wanted to include all common masses into the activity. So they had to build huge, spacious complexes and pavilions. Then it was all these Vyalakanta pillars were included into the temple in more numbers. But you have rare instances of all the forums in earlier Hoysala and
Hello.
Okay, sir. Suresh, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So Manoj, sir. Yes, sir.
Manoj, sir is not up. He's not up here.
What, disconnected?
Yeah, it was disconnected.
Hello.
Oh, okay, sir. Shall we conclude?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Conclude, sir, please.
Okay, sir. So once again, I would like to thank Manoj, sir, for frankly one of the best temple architecture lecture we have ever attended. It was quite interesting and useful for us. And the appreciation from the participants was very appreciable and very well explained. The sir, Dr. Manoj sir has explained each and every detail. We all got clear idea about the understanding of fundamentals of temple architecture. Manoj sir have explained about how temples served as a focal point of all socio-cultural, economic, and religious and spiritual activities. Apart from that, he made us understand the fundamentals of temple architecture by going through the original text. The way you explained the 6 components of temple and its structure, like the plan, elevation, and intricate details, I think Manoj sir has come. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, come. Good. Okay, so you continue, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So the way you have, Manoj sir, the way you have explained the 6 components of temple and its structure, like the plan, elevation, and the intricate details, it was very well explained. Thanks for your valuable time, sir. I would like to thank all the participants for sparing the time and attending this webinar. I thank all our organizers, Professor Charles, Professor Subramaniam sir, and the coordinator Dilipan sir for coordinating and hosting this webinar. On behalf of our college as well as on behalf of participants, Manoj sir, I would like to thank once again for the valuable lectures. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, participants, and we will very soon upload the details on the YouTube as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Manoj sir. We want hands-on experience for our students. Hello.
Column, sir, maybe.
Yeah. Sir, we'll arrange.
tell me,
We'll
sir.
arrange. Yeah, we'll
Hello.
arrange after Corona issue. We'll arrange a workshop for 3 days workshop for the students.
We can hear you.
Yeah. You can accept my request, sir. Please come Coimbatore, and our student need your knowledge. And here there is a Pattishwara Perur temple.
I will be glad.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, through. Hello.
It is Perur temple, yes.
Yeah, through the Perur temple, we can have a hands-on
Hello, tell me.
classes, sir. Yeah.
I'm able to hear.
We can.
Tell me.
Yeah. Through the Perur temple, we can have a hands-on experience class, sir, for 3 days architecture for the students after the Corona issue.
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
we can have a field visit.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.